Hello and welcome to Event Marketing Strategies for 2024 and Beyond, Mastering the Hybrid Shift. My name is Maya Chushinska. I'm one of the partners here at Pinch Marketing, and I wanted to take a moment to thank you all for joining us here today. Before we take off, please make sure that your seat and tray table are in the upright and locked position. But in all seriousness, we did want to take a moment to make sure that you get the absolute most out of today's event with some of our wonderful features like the chat function. So please make sure to share your thoughts, experiences, connect, and most importantly, ask questions. When prompted by your host, make sure to participate in our live polls because your input will help enrich today's discussion, and the results will be shared in real time with the panel and all users. For our discussion today, our panel is set to last about 45 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A session, or guarantee your question gets answered and ask it beforehand. Just a little tip there for you guys. I also wanted to thank our sponsors today, EventMobi, enterprise-grade event planning software, which you are using right now, and Mavis, an exclusive network that connects marketers and businesses. Now, without further ado, let me introduce you to your host for today, Martin Pietchek, CEO of Pinch Marketing. Over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Maya. So appreciated the intro. Welcome to this journey through the ever-evolving landscape of B2B event marketing. In the last 3 years, we've seen remote connectivity redefine our world, with names like Zoom etching ourselves into daily lives. As we venture into post-lockdown era, a fresh wave of enthusiasm for in-person gatherings surges on. However, the digital innovations born during lockdowns continue to have an enduring impact on future of event marketing. According to Forrester, for instance, a whopping 58% of marketers foresee their B2B events embracing a hybrid structure. So not just in person, not just the virtual, but both. The digital transformation has opened up new avenues for engaging audiences online, with 76% of marketers enjoying broader reach and higher attendance at their events. The hybrid evolution contributed to the emergence of new trends, spanning from safety concerns to shifts in human behavior and mentality, the rise of eco-consciousness, inclusivity, and the expansion of data-driven intelligence to craft event experiences. So I wonder, how has event marketing adapted to captivate attendees before, during, and after events, all while delivering the finest return on event investment? But that's why we're here today. We have a fantastic group here to help capitalize on the trends and turn them into opportunities. But before I get into the introductions, please use the poll feature when I prompt you to answer 3 simple questions that will really help us engage with the panelists, and they will be presented during the live discussion. So let me jump into the introductions. Cynthia Keeshan. She holds a role of VP Strategic Events, Marketing at Ceridian, global leader of human capital management technology. She spearheads a team responsible for orchestrating strategic events on the global scale. Take a bow. Elmira Abushayeva, as the CMO and co-founder of Mavis, an inclusive network that connects marketers and businesses, and Elmira brings a wealth of event marketing experiences from the tech sector. Then we have Kayla Spies. She's the CMO at Sears, a cloud solutions and technology services provider. Recently, also the head of partner solutions marketing at Google. She has an in-depth familiarity with the channel and partnership ecosystem within the tech space. And Torben Grosser, serving as the VP of product marketing and events at EventMobi, a premier events management software provider. Torben boasts a wealth of experience, not only in event management, but also event tech. So welcome, everyone. Fantastic. Great to have you all. So let me jump into the first question. But before I do so, this is the first time I'm going to say, please have a chance to complete the first poll question. Okay, so nowadays hybrid events have evolved to become the standard in gold event marketing. What strategies have proven successful in seemingly integrating physical and digital elements? And because it's a 2-part question, I'm going to throw this also in. How can B2B event marketers strike a balance between the physical and digital aspects to create a holistic event experience? Torben, I'm going to start off with you. You come from event technology space. You've seen thousands of events firsthand. You saw the evolution, what's been happening in the space. So why don't you get us started?
So I think what has become, so the first thing that has become really successful is considering hybrid at all. So if we think about a pre-COVID world, everybody was thinking that online streaming or webinars was something for companies that just cannot afford to run events. And we've seen during the pandemic that it is possible to do these things online really well and connect them with an audience that's on site really well. And B, we've become so much better at doing these things. So the first thing I think that has fundamentally changed and has evolved in hybrid events is that we're considering them a possibility, and we're considering them real events. And I think that's the first big shift. The second shift, how B2B event marketers can strike a balance between the physical and digital aspects. That's a good question. So I think the important thing here is, again, to understand your audiences, understand where they're coming from, and making sure that even if hybrid means that there's an online portion and a virtual portion of the same event, that they are not supposed to be exact replicas of each other, but rather they need to be tailor-made and tailor-adjusted to the respective audiences.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Tom. I think it's a great point. I know, Cynthia, we had a brief chat about that. I know you're coming off planning an event, I think, later this week. So why don't I over to you? Like, what has been how do you want to address this question?
Well, firstly, thanks so much, Martin, for having me here today. And hello to everybody out there online. We all feel your pain. Don't we feel the same pain? Because one of the things, and I think you'll hear Kayla talk about this more too, which I love her insight on it, is this whole notion about trying to balance between what is the purpose, what is the function of the two events. And it's not as clear cut as it used to be. Remember, we were back in 2020, it was really clear cut. And so now one of the things I'm always trying to think through is like, okay, what is the purpose to the event? And then getting right back to that thing, like all my tech marketers out there know what I'm about to say, the data. But using the data in a way to convert that into intelligence. So what am I going to achieve and to who? Who am I trying to attract and why? And what do I need to deliver to them? It's the same thing when we think about a live event. When we think about live events, we're thinking about the geography, we're thinking about how that drives audience and so forth. But it's a real tough situation now, isn't it, for us to kind of balance between those two, because we have become so much more proficient with some of the online options that we have for virtual events, but it's not as clear cut. Like, remember live, a person would be at an event and they'd lose their attention every 7 minutes. They disengage with the content every 7 minutes. I mean, I think we all know. Now we disengage much quicker. And so now when we have to start to balance those two things between the live event and the virtual event, it is also considering like, what is the objective of that? And that brings me back to that data point. Does that sound like, Martin? What's your thought?
No, I think it's I think you're right. I think I was going to say 7 minutes. For me, it's more like 30 seconds these days. I think it's my ADD is raging probably right now as you say this. But I absolutely agree, and I'm not surprised by what you're saying. But I really struck a chord with what Torben was saying. You were saying that you cannot treat those instances the same way. It's not like you're just putting a camera in the back of a stage and hoping that it's going to translate. It has to be done slightly differently for both audiences and how they consume the content. So I'm going to move over to Elmira, but maybe before we do we have any poll results so far, Arun? Is this something that we can show folks, or is this too soon? And if not, I will switch over to Elmira. She can answer that question. Okay, maybe we didn't have any poll results just yet, but okay, maybe we can just continue. Elmira, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting that you, Cynthia, that you mentioned the data, like, because for me was actually talking about the audience and, like the way that the hybrid and event and the live is together, that actually gave us an ability to reach wider audience, right? So for us, like, it was actually easier to reach out now to all the people, different people in different departments, besides just, the ones that are usually coming to the live events, right? And I think that was the whole expansion and like eye-opening for a lot of people. And then people just overall, like some of them, they prefer sometimes to attend the hybrid event because they just, it's just unless sometimes they just don't have budget, for example, or they have more, they don't have time, right? So I think it gave us an amazing capability of that for sure. So that's just like looking from the perspective of the audience, I think that's really good expansion. And then for the holistic event experience, Martin, I truly think that it also depends on the industry. Like, for example, it depends on the industry, like how you want to approach that with in terms of like the people that would be more interested in, let's say, hybrid or just like live events. For example, I'm coming from, I came before from the home building industry, software and home building, and they really preferred in person a lot, even though we still had hybrid. But hybrid did allow us, as I said already, to reach to those people like in accounting departments, in operations departments where we couldn't reach before to people, right? And just obviously kind of having the reliable platform like we are today on EventMobile, like it's really important, because I know I've stuck to so many problems when you just have Zoom meetings and, AV team on the stage, and it's not such a holistic experience at all. So there's a lot to consider. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Umira. This is a very good point as well. I think, it really depends on the audience. I think it's really all about, as marketers, I think we know how this works. Like we need to know who are we catering to. Not everybody is maybe designed to participate in the virtual setting, and not everybody's designed to be in person. So I think we have to be very cognizant of that. So thank you for that point. Makes a lot of sense. I'm being told, Arun, we might have results. 30 seconds. Do they have something in? Let's see. What are we seeing here right now? Let's see if I can go to full screen to see what the results really are. And full screen mode. Okay, it looks like majority of people, so 45% are saying, oh my God, my screen is covering it, so I can't see. So this is they're doing virtual. So I see. So the next event is doing 36% in person, 45% in person, and then 18% both. Interesting. I think, Torben, I know I think I asked you that question for what you've been seeing. I'm pretty sure this is pretty similar to what you've been seeing as well. So, but before I get back to you on this, I just want to make sure that I get an opportunity to Kayla to see what do you think of these numbers? Is this surprising to you, or this makes a lot of sense?
Hey, everyone. No, absolutely not surprising, to be honest. I think the last few years have taught us anything. It's that marketing is both an art and a science, and you need to have both things sort of working in concert. I think it's also given us a new tolerance to try new things, which is fascinating, because I think back to the beginning of sort of 2020, and in that position I was coming and talking to the channel about how we're going to move all of these, physical events we had planned into a digital environment. And there was so much sort of hesitation on, I can't do that. I don't know that skill set. I don't know. And we've taught ourselves so much. So we were able to continue to adapt in this art and science mode of creating meaningful moments with our audiences that were digital. And many of us knew that also created a lot more human connection, actually, because you were coming to folks from their homes, places you'd never seen from both your colleagues or from an event perspective or other. And I think sort of the experience we developed was also that we were able to humanize a lot more through digital. And I think it really gave us this interesting new perspective on digital, which, Torben, you said it, and I'm super obsessed with online events right now as well as part of the marketing mix, but it brought back, webinars and digital to be cool, right? Like we're back in the main stage. It wasn't just about the physical event. We were able to blend both. And I think the one thing I really do appreciate is that it became humanizing. And I do think that's interesting when we think about the experiences that are then created through these forums. So just a different perspective on that, but totally recognize the trends you're all seeing.
Okay, this is fantastic. You're just spoon feeding the next question to me, which is fantastic, which is really essentially this idea of, I think attendee expectations are shifting, right? They may be changing. I think people are perhaps becoming, they've been taught through the experience through the pandemic and others that experiential marketing is gaining some prominence. And as it is gaining prominence, I think marketers have an opportunity to craft new face-to-face gatherings to, I think you called it, the emotional connections, where it can leave a lasting impression. And I know that the creativity in these approaches is really key and important. And I know in the past, I think marketers have been really heavily impacted to planning alcohol-based activities to create those connections and experiences. But obviously things have changed. So I'm looking to you, Cynthia, like what are your thoughts? I know you're creating an event just around the corner that's going to be talking, you probably have these experiences ready. Like, what are your thoughts on this?
I think you're absolutely on the right track here. Like when we think about 2021, that's when we did a return to live events. And what we got then as an attendee was a person who was just ecstatic to be out, right? And now when we look at the type of attendee that's showing up, they are so thirsty for the connections and the networking and the experience. And it's really changed the way I started to think about the event delivery experience. I think it was Kayla was saying, really humanizing the experience. Like when we think, and like I'm talking to you now, Microsoft and Google and all the big brands, right? When we used to do events in 2018, 2019, we could throw out things like, well, MC Hammer's going to be there with Metallica. And people would be like, this is amazing. But now what we find is, no, they have to be able to connect. So a concert, just like going to a movie, you don't engage with the person beside you. You're looking up ahead. And so when we think about the experiences now, it's different. And it's also translating to the content. Like, remember how you used to go to an event and sometimes it would be 60 minutes of content where you're sitting there? Now I think that we have an opportunity to create snacks of content. So at our event next week, we do these 15-minute power sessions, which is high level of what we're going to be talking about. Or it's a 40-minute, or it's that general session notion. But when the attendee now is coming up, we are experiencing a different attendee. And alcohol used to be the thing that we would fuel it, but we have to be mindful now about who's coming to the event and what the experience is that they're looking for. Because what I'm also noting with attendees as they come now, I mean, you guys know this, you've experienced this, there's a level of impatience. There's a level of expectation. And they can't have too many hurdles to go through because they've already gone through the biggest hurdle, which is either connecting to your Zoom call or getting on that plane and getting to the location. And so it's a different attendee showing up now, and it's changing how we manage risk as much as we manage experience.
Very good point. I really like that. So thank you, Cynthia. Amira, I know that I've attended a couple of events with you, and I think you really are a queen or of the events where engagement and those experiences are at the forefront. What are your thoughts on this, like the experiential marketing in general and how prominent it's become?
Thank you, Martin, for all the kind words. I do love events, as you know, like that's my passion for marketing, I would say. Yeah, definitely. First of all, agree with Cynthia that the attendee has changed for sure. They do want something more private, like whenever it is like even sessions or anything, that they actually want some more private, like, round tables, except besides those big sessions and stuff. So be more in a private, like a few people kind of circle thing. But for when you were talking about the actual interactive sessions, networking events, right, and etc., what I noticed personally, and Delia, which was my partner in Mavis, we did this launch event last year, and we actually created this beautiful connection where people, there was a lock and a key where people had to find each other. So like, one person had a lock, another one person had a key. And believe it or not, people loved that because they wanted to find out about each other, right? So they wanted to like know who it is, and then they would potentially win a prize if they, let's say, found the match. Things like that, like just spark up people. They get excited. They want to learn about each other because they have to engage into conversations, right? So I think something like that is like very, very needed these days. Another one that we did in a big conferences was the cooking class, for example, right? And people would not think of that, but people actually want to be engaged, and it would be like a massive cooking class. I would say about 50 to 60 people that would get engaged, but it would be in groups again. They would be working in groups. And obviously there is a moderator who helps them, the chef, and etc. But they loved it. They loved it. Besides, again, that's the interaction. Again, they remember it. It's very, experiential for them. And then overall, the activities, around the events, just before the event or the pre-conference things, I feel like also, again, create that connection for people. So I found that those were like really, really, really powerful, besides just, having those cocktail events and etc. And interesting enough, also for just mentioning the alcohol overall, that we noticed that alcohol also became less popular these days after the pandemic. Somehow people, I guess, became more connected to themselves, and alcohol started to be like much less. So anyways, so it's just to consider, like, if you really want to do those open bars, like big open bars going forward. So that's my experience.
Oh, thanks, Elmira. I mean, I still like my glass of wine from time to time, and the cooking class, I'll sign up for that for sure. But I also like the gamification concept. I really love that idea. I think it engages people, it puts them together, makes them work together. And I think that's what's the best way for them to connecting, right? I think that's one of those. So Kayla, I know that you've had a lot of events under your belt, and I know when we had a brief conversation prior to this call, you talked about the importance of allowing people to connect and creating those experiences. So tell us more about that.
Sure. My philosophy on this is that you need to find unique experiences that actually speak to your brand. So it's so funny. I love the lock and key, but I'm like, oh, how would that work for Sears now? And so now I need a version of that would sort of work for us, because it needs to feel authentic to really come across in this human and connection way, both to each other, but ultimately to my brand value proposition, which is ultimately why we're here. We took an interesting swing recently, which I'll sort of share as a brief example, because we have this concept in the brand I'm at right now, Sears, where we have an entire investment around better living, which is all around mindfulness, meditation, being, sort of slowing down to go fast. And we have an entire practice around this. And so it's quite lovely. How do you bring that to a conference? How do you bring some of what makes, this brand unique to, a very busy trade show experience? Well, what we decided to do was to create a mini retreat zone inside our booth. So rather than peppering people with additional content, we've all been to enough trade shows where it's busy and noisy, and then you have to sit down and listen to someone's content speaking to you into a tiny microphone, and you're trying to pay attention, and ultimately someone just wants to eat their sandwich in that little chair, right? So I was like, let's not do that. Let's connect people to our brand. So we created through those DJ headphones, those like silent disco headphones. We gave everybody a set of silent disco headphones and let them pick their meditation channel. We introduced the concept, why it was important to Sears, and that in order to really do big thinking and to solve big problems, challenging problems, and look at things differently, you had to slow down. You had to come in with a clean, fresh mind, and you needed a mindfulness break. So before we could talk to them about content and engineering-led solutions and everything that we do, we had to slow things down. So for 5 minutes, we took people through a guided meditation. And it was super cool. Huge risk. Could have been considered extremely strange. And there were people who were like, I don't want to. I'm like, you have 5 minutes to invest in you. And it was interesting once we had people actually slow down and engage, close their eyes and listen to this meditation. You'd see people like doing the neck movements and rolling their arms and, just really getting into it. The conversation changed. So it's a different take, and it was a little bit risky, and it wouldn't work all the time, but it connected people more to our brand to then do the big thinking that needed to be done. But it was a big swing, and I don't know, jury's still out, but I think it was pretty cool.
Oh, I love that. I mean, we should probably do a quick 3-minute meditation at the end of this. I need one.
Yeah.
I need one, I think. But as long as we have a subliminal message at the end says, give us a lead, I think we're all good. But let's. This is a perfect segue to the next question, and I'm going to throw a poll. Request for another poll. So there's a second question that I would love for you guys to answer. And Torben, you could try to answer the question that we just had while people are collecting their thoughts on this poll, and then we can jump into the next question.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing we need to realize as event organizers is that yes, booze is great, and don't get me wrong, I'm a German. I love drinking and I love being excessive about it, but normalizing this at conferences. I was at a conference last year where they had a hangover bar, which was essentially a giant like drawer with aspirin and paracetamol and all that stuff in there, next to an open bar which opened at 9 a.m. in the morning. I mean, we need to stop doing this as an industry, because it is not helpful. It's making everybody worse to a certain extent if we do this systematically. So we kind of need to rethink our relationship with alcohol. Now, one of the reasons why people drink at conferences is because conferences are stressful, and alcohol is really, really good at reducing stress, at least temporarily. And so I like all these things that have been said about focusing on mindfulness and also focusing on people who have different needs at your event. Now, the one thing that I want to say about networking is that what I always saw in events, what really helped is not only assuming that you can throw people into a room and they will network automatically, but guide them. And sometimes that takes a person whose sole job, we used to have this at conferences in the past, there's a beautiful French term for it called a conférencier, who is somebody that just introduces people to each other. That's all they do. And I think that's one of the one of the things that we need to do to actively drive networking, and also to create these calm experiences. When one of the speakers earlier mentioned mindfulness, I had to think of one of the greatest experiences which I had in a workshop at a conference, where the speaker asked us to sit under the table. It was like a table with these long tablecloths down to the ground, and they gave us a book, and they gave everybody a flashlight, and they turned the lights off in the room, and we had to read to each other. And it was an incredibly intimate moment. And things like that, if you could put the human experience first, forget about all the technology, forget about all the apps that you have, put the human experience first, I think then you're winning with networking.
Torben, I love this. I think I love the idea of, I'll have to, you'll have to send me the term, the French term of the person whose job is to introduce others. But I think it's a fantastic idea. I love that. And reading books on the tables, that's an interesting one. I like that. But which brings me to another interesting point. Like, intimacy and closeness at events, especially in person, can be, I don't know about you. I went to an event recently and in Vegas, and people were like in my face, and I was like, I didn't know how to feel about this during post-COVID. Just not post-COVID, but post-lockdown era. So there is new challenges that are coming to mind, right? People are cautious. People feel potentially unsafe. So going to the next question, I'm going to ask to throw the poll up in a second, Arun, is the continued emphasis on safety. Especially, we had masks, perhaps we had social distancing. I'm sure there's other strategies now, but what strategies? Okay, so thank you, Torben. What other strategies can B2B marketers implement to ensure a secure and comfortable environment for both attendees? And I'm not just saying just physically, but even virtually, because I'm assuming that safety is not just confined into a room. So, Elmira, can you get us started on that? What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, for sure. It was interesting that why hybrid came in, I think, into the place, especially after we allowed to meet in person after the pandemic, because some people still did not feel, and I think to this day, there are certain people who do not feel comfortable to be in this, and you describe yourself, for example, comfortable in those environments. So the hybrid, also obviously the virtual, is really, really important to have in those moments. But again, coming back to what I mentioned about the industry, some people, some industries, they just want to be, they don't care. They will be like very close, kissing you almost in the cheeks and stuff. So it depends on the audience as well. I find for us, the experience-wise, what I experienced personally is that especially 2021, 2022, again, which was still this kind of comfortability, it was important to just be mindful, especially at the in-person events where you had to, for example, where the most congested events, so you can time slots in your conference, right? So for example, the registration, right? So instead of having registration certain time only for 1-2 hours or whatever it is, we actually extend it over 2 days, right? So when people were arriving, they would come whenever they arrived. So there was no line, nothing like that. People felt more comfortable to do that, right? That was one. And then of course, even space-wise, of course, I know it's really hard to when you plan big events, but space-wise, just be mindful of the kind of putting people not too close to each other. I'm not saying 2 meters, but just saying sometimes people don't prefer to be very close to each other at the tables, right? So I think that was one of the things to consider, to have a little bit more space. I think that was really important. And of course, just the option to, as we mentioned already, a kind of network also in a smaller events sometimes. For example, people sometimes don't really want large networking. So if you could divide them into groups of different networking, let's say by departments, by functions, or whatever it is, they actually also would prefer that because they feel, again, more secure in those things. Again, it's changing step by step, but that was my experience. And in a virtual setting as well, it was really important that people kind of, being looked after, because again, it's easy to just put the platform on and, have it run by itself. But it was important that someone would be there, as a almost moderator, there is different sessions, moderators, etc., where people look after you, right? And then And obviously if there's any questions or any concerns, maybe there's some, I'm not saying arguments, but maybe some, conversations happening, that you make sure that you as a company control that and be mindful of like different people being in the virtual space as well. So that was my experience. I can talk about it more, but I think those are my points.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. That's make perfect sense to me. I think the smaller groups in networking would have really helped me in the last event I went to, but I was thrown into Vegas, and Vegas is Vegas. So, Kayla, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to be pretty consistent just about, thinking about everybody and kind of being as mindful as you can. So though your own personal preferences might not, be the only preference you're solving for, you need to ask for a variety of opinions. Like, what is the data saying? Actually, should we be a little bit more, mindful of certain areas or certain groups? Are there potential spikes in certain areas we need to be more mindful? I think part of it is just being aware that this is something we live with. And frankly, I think it's taught us some really good event hygiene techniques. To be really honest, I do think, the close talk, having a certain level of space and distance and discussion, it actually taught us a whole bunch of new hygiene places where we can actually lean in on this and ensure just people don't leave any event potentially being ill, right? So if anything, there's some lessons here that we're taught, and I think we should continue to apply those, but it comes down to being mindful. One thing I really liked, and just a quick plug, was having people opt in for their preference. So, I've seen events do this where they'll let you change your lanyard or let you wear a little bracelet or something that sort of says like, oh, I don't like to hug, or whatever it is. You don't have to explain it. But the first thing I'm going to do when I see Cynthia next time is I'm going to go and hug her. But if she had her green bracelet on and said, I prefer that we don't, then at least I'll be mindful of it. And I think I love the execution of these type of little elements, which allows for personal choice. And then people can express themselves in a way in which that's maybe a little bit less assuming than like, no, but actually allows them to choose. I think that's also very important. But then on us as event owners, it's important that we normalize why we've made those choices. So talk about it, put it in the keynote, explain why those elements are there. I think those things fall down, especially in physical events, when we don't communicate the why, the detail has been called out. So if we as marketers take time to create a detail like that, where someone's wearing a different colored badge to signify that they don't want to shake your hand, they prefer to fist bump or whatever, they don't want to hug, that's okay. Or they don't drink. Don't ask me about drinking. Whatever those things are, we have to normalize that as part of our program in a detail that we chose. So just a couple thoughts.
I love the practical tip there, Kayla. This is fantastic. I really love the idea that, and it doesn't put the onus of the person to reject someone, right?
Exactly.
Like, especially if it's a friend or a colleague that you've been historically close with, and now you have this tendency to want to hug you or kiss you or whatever that may be, and now the onus is not on you to say, hey, I'm going to reject you.
Yeah.
And now it's sort of up to the organizers almost to say, hey, look, I have this wristband, please watch those. It's going to be really cool. I love that tip. It's a really, really practical tip. Torben, I know you're jotting some notes here, so I think you're stealing that idea. I can see it. So what are your thoughts? Like, what have you done historically to make that?
Yeah, I can honestly not to talk too much to in-person events, because I'm not an expert on that. The only thing that I personally as an attendee want is just give me a room where I can sit in silence and not have to talk to people for like an hour a day. But when we talk about security for virtual events, so I mean, there's obviously a cybersecurity aspect to it. So make sure that you at least do the minimum when it comes to cybersecurity, GDPR, and so on. Most suppliers do that. But then the other thing that you want to look for in order to make your event safe, well, safe from what? And there's a lot of things that can happen in events. So I think the first, we talked about like the cybersecurity and data security aspect of it, but it doesn't stop there. It goes on to being safe from discrimination. What does that mean? So that means that ideally your platform is ADA or whatever standard you have in your country compliant, to allow for people with special requirements, vision impairments, hearing impairments, and so on, to be able to participate in your event. What else does that mean? It means probably trying to close captioning in your session. And I mean, if we're doing a session like this one, it's actually pretty expensive and also not that easy to do proper closed captioning. So if you're doing something smaller like this, totally fine, I think, to do it without, but ideally it would be different, but it's acceptable. But if you're doing a large event, definitely do closed captioning. And then the last thing that I want to bring up, and I did a lot of research about this yesterday, and sorry, last year actually, when I was preparing a presentation around that topic, is if you're doing online events, you're essentially creating an online community, and an online community needs community guidelines. And so what that means is that you need to agree with your audience on how do we behave, how do we talk to each other, about each other when we network, because the other thing that's happening here is that you're online, so there's less inhibition to essentially just be a jerk. People online are terrible people, and so you need to create a safe space for your audience where if somebody behaves in a poor way, they can get reported, they can get removed, they can get told to behave differently. So these are some of the mechanisms that you would want to put in place with the virtual portion of a hybrid event.
I really like that. Thanks, Torben, for balancing. We don't tend to think about security or safety online until, of course, we hear about, data being stolen, or, today we're talking about events. Maybe it's nothing necessarily too private, but what if it was a conference, medical conference, dealing with personal data, diseases, or like you said, disabilities. It's a good way to balance that. So thank you for that, Torben. And unfortunately, we did not have guidelines for this event, so I apologize. But I just want to say to everyone now, please be nice and civil.
I'm watching the chat. Everybody is wonderful.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you for that, audience. I appreciate the civility. Cynthia, I know you probably have some ideas and thoughts after you heard the other three panelists.
Yeah, it's funny when we think about it, like creating the event experience. I loved what Kayla said in terms of like providing the options, and thinking about that in terms of seating and so forth. And security is always one of those things, right? Safety, reducing risk. And sometimes I find with event marketers, we will want to take on the complete ownership of that. And we should be thinking through like who are the other partners that are within our business, or who is our venue partner as well, to be able to dig into that with, and to make sure like we know the rules of engagement that we're applying by as well. Because when we think about the returned attendee and what their expectations are, like, look, we know even from the people that we work with, people are coming in now with a lot heightened concerns or zero concerns. And so it's just a matter of trying to figure out, like, I love the way Torben says it about creating that psychologically safe place, and whether that's live or whether that's virtual. I think there are things that we should be considering to do that, like even simple things, right? Like options about where are people seated, like, I mean, when I go to an event, usually I like to stand at the back. That's my thing. But especially when you're in a Vegas event, so maybe it's like different types of seating. You can have rows like a theater seat, and then half moon tables, and then standing. But it's starting to really think through who that attendee is now, and where are they coming from.
Yeah, I think what's really coming prevalent in this conversation, I'm feeling that you cannot cater to everybody the same way. It sounds like you really have to take into consideration there's different kinds of people, different needs, and we have to do that slightly differently. Like you said, maybe for Torben, he needs that 1 hour quiet room. For others, maybe meditations. Others need a quick bar with friends. So it's a very unique experience for everyone. So thank you for that. And Arun, I will ask you to throw up the poll real quick. We had one of the poll questions to showcase what are the main challenges that people are seeing. And I, unfortunately, even though I have glasses, I'm having a tough time seeing these results. Does everybody else see the numbers here? Let me see if I can do this. Let me see if I can do some of my other dual screen. There we go. Thank you for that. So yeah, like what are the most biggest challenges? And again, there's I cannot see it. Content delivery and customization is problematic. Tech and infrastructure. Thank you, Maya. Tech and infrastructure, 28.75% is the number one. Audience engagement, 25%. and I see content delivery and customizations in third. So yeah, I'm not surprised by some of these elements, but sounds like tech and infrastructure is high on the list. I'm interested in about that. We can tackle that a little bit in a second. Torben, I think you can probably sink your teeth into that one, but we can come back to that in a second. So let's jump into the next question. We're slightly behind time, but I think it's a really great conversation. So I don't mind. Hopefully you don't either. So basically, the newness aspect, I call this the newness of all this innovation of hybrid events comes at a bit of a risk too. And the risk comes from, in my opinion, this idea that it's unproven, right? It's possibly challenging to define what success looks like. Could be expensive. And ultimately, how do we navigate that? Like how do you look at that in terms of like being able to sell this internally, some of those new innovative ideas, getting the budget perhaps required, and then navigating the unknown? So Kayla, like how do you navigate those little challenges?
Just a few things, right? Marketers, it's never a dull moment for us as marketers, and we're used to pitching things. So frankly, this is our jam. I'd say there's less need of necessarily pitching the ideas internally. I feel like we have done a very good job, and marketers should all pat themselves on the back, especially those marketers that weren't necessarily, in digital marketers, whereas everyone became a digital marketer. So I think first and foremost, let's take a lap on that, because we've now proven that digital marketing is possible. And even if you were traditionally an in-person or a trade show marketer or a physical marketer and experiential, we learned something, and I don't think we have to prove it. It works. It allowed us to connect. It allowed for funnels to continue. It allowed for us to reach audiences. It allowed for us to cook in people's homes. And the amount of stuff that was shipped to my New York apartment, assuming I had a barbecue in the last 3 years there, was pretty funny. So point is, I think it's proven. What I would say is it still comes down to setting a reasonable ROI or expectation with your audience. And I think actually talking through and understanding the costs involved on everything is important. We should all know, hybrid is not inexpensive. It's not necessarily an inexpensive route to have 2 core event teams running, a live stream, say, in person at an event, and creating it. There's a lot to consider here, and we've all become producers as well. And that was never necessarily part of the core marketing remit. And so I think part of it is just setting realistic expectations on what you're going to be able to do with the team you have and the infrastructure you have as just raised. And then also you have to measure everything, right? So you got to start somewhere. And I always say, like, underestimate, ensure that you'll meet those ROI numbers, if that is the number of audience, the engagement you're having, the poll responses. There's different ways of sort of finding different things to measure, but ultimately you have to find a way in which to start somewhere, and you can always exceed that. That's what we know. So my guidance is always, you underestimate a little bit, you ensure that you're feeling good about that ROI, and then you're able to paint the picture that you need to paint. But ultimately it comes down to engagement, and it comes down to your follow-up plans as well. I think the last thing I would add to this is, what I'm learning and what I'm seeing a lot more is we get so excited on all the front end of all these big productions, and we're done. When we're done, marketers, we're like, okay, next, the event is over. Obviously the book is closed. Nothing else to do here, folks, right? And the fact is, that's when the work starts again, because you have to nurture, you have to get your sales team aligned. And so I think the biggest guidance I would give on that is just make sure you're not thinking about the event being the only moment. In fact, the event is the new starting line. And then your follow-up plan is really where you need to put a lot more of your energy and attention. So I think that'll help with some of your ROI if you think about it and plan in advance, and don't consider the event the end state.
Yeah, thanks for the Kayla. I absolutely agree. I think there's a big fallacy I see happening, that people treat marketing as a bit of a campaign with a start and end date. As we all know, it's never ending. It should be always ongoing cycle that just repeats and hopefully gets better over time. Okay, so Torben, how do you go about the ROI conversations around events and trying to mix the hybrid that can be more expensive?
There's a couple of things here. So firstly, how hybrid is more expensive, it depends on how you do it. So I think one of the things that we also learned over the past is that you can reduce cost of hybrid events if you don't bring out the entire giant setup. And the other thing to bear in mind here is that we saw in online events, for the first 3 weeks of the pandemic, we were literally producing out of our bedrooms with bad hardware that we had at our disposal, and it worked. So if people can understand you, it's already fine. You don't need to put up a big production. Yes, it looks great, but it's not necessarily affecting the ROI as much as you would intuitively think. Now, the next thing to really consider here is that, and you mentioned this, Martin, just in passing, is it obviously needs to be integrated. The tracking needs to be integrated with your entire marketing funnel. So in the end of the day, events are a touch point, just like any email or any gift card that you send or whatever you track in your marketing automation or your CRM system. So make sure that events also sit in there and are being tracked the same. The thing that changes massively about hybrid events, and I think that's where we need to differentiate, is that we have a lot of signals and events, and we can track a lot of signals relatively easily, even with a platform such as Zoom, which is very basic. The problem is a lot of event marketers, the only metric that they're tracking is signups and attendance and the resulting show or no-show rate. And that's not everything. And I mean, I think Kayla mentioned it just now, being able to track interaction, being able to put a value on how much time you spent, how much you engaged, how often you came back, how often you watched the recordings. All these signals, being able to put them into context, going back, thinking about, what do I want to do at my event? How do I want my event to work? What do I want out of my event? And then looking at all the signals that I have available and saying, okay, I'm going to look at these things and I want to optimize for these. I think that's the best way to go about it. And one last thing to bear in mind here is that all of these platforms, they track so much, and it's completely pointless to put a dollar or ROI value to everything. Decide for the best 2 or 3 or 4 things, track those, and make sure you do it consistently across different events.
That's good, Torben. I'm very cognizant of time now. I'm being told I'm not doing a great job at keeping time with everyone, so I apologize. But I'm just enjoying the conversation too much. Maybe that's the problem. I'm a marketer myself, and I'm like taking a lot of notes here. So I apologize for that. But Torben, thank you. This is a really good context. The ROI conversation is always important, especially with new technology. And I know, Cynthia, I didn't allow you and Mira to address this question just yet, but I want to jump sort of to the next question a little bit. And this question of technology and costs. And I think, and Maya sent me the results of the last poll, which is basically saying, like, what's the role of technology, emerging technology? And obviously there's been a lot of conversation about AI, right? ChatGPT, all these other AI tools. I thought I wouldn't have a job 6 months from now, but I'm still here, thankfully. But like, what have you been seeing? How has this level of technology been used during events or during the production process, marketing process? What have you been seeing, and how have you leveraging it, if you're leveraging it? According to our poll, majority of folks want to talk about AI. 60% of folks want to see, like, what are they saying about AI, machine learning tools? Anybody who can ask this question? Who can start us on this? I think, Torben, I had you, but I'm going to skip you. I'm sorry.
Please.
Cynthia, can I start with you this time around?
Yeah, of course you can. Thank you. It's funny. Next week, one of the features of the event is we're going to be speaking to, we have a guest speaker that's going to be talking about the impact that AI has on work. And there was a thing that he said that I really loved, which was, we're in such an early stage with AI and really understanding what we are able to tap from it. But one thing that it's going to do, which is great news for us, is it's going to be able to help us to predict trends. So when we think about, like, okay, thinking about that audience, what are some of the key things that they're going to be focused on, and how can I serve up a solution that's going to be able to help them address their challenge? And that is going to be something that we'll be able to do I would say we'll probably start to see that type of innovation coming to us. Probably, I mean, look at Kayla's nodding. She's like, I got a solution in my back pocket. I've already built it. But also, it's going to take off of our plate the jobs that are, I mean, we've all cheated. Everyone's cheated with ChatGPT to help write like emails and things like that. But what it will do for us as event marketers is open up an opportunity for the thinkers and the strategists. And you can appreciate in the last couple of years, like we've worked at such a fast pace that we haven't really had an opportunity to do the thinking and the strategy. And I think that's where AI is going to be able to help us better understanding who we're serving and enable us to be able to think, okay, then what is the new and unique experience that I'm going to be able to bring?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
That's just my take.
Yeah, thanks, Cynthia. I completely agree with you. That's how I'd like to see it or think about it for sure, that it's going to alleviate some of the tasks that are perhaps mundane and grunt work, so to speak, and open up for strategic opportunities. We have Elmira. What are your thoughts on an AI and how has it changed your work?
Yeah, no, overall, I think it's the most important thing, prompting, like what Kayla mentioned about the, follow-up, coming back to ROI in a way, is to have the automated emails, have automated prompt messages that come in right after the conference or maybe even during conference, right, to the actual attendees from salespeople or etc. Kind of planning that in advance and helping obviously with AI to write those things with marketers orchestrating that. I think that's really important because I've been there where the follow-ups would not be done right away, and of course because people are tired and etc. after the conference, so it takes usually like a week or two to follow up and etc. Where if we allow this automation tools with AI together, like help us, right? I think that's a better ROI right away for these conferences, and then people can respond, of course, whenever they're ready and etc. So that was like one of the things that I think is helpful. And another one is that just I guess if we're talking about at the conference, at the events overall, what I'm seeing is that also the apps that I'm sure like most of you like use the apps obviously at the conferences, right? Like when people are kind of almost expect now like automated check-ins, automated, like the communication part, I think is very important. Like so they don't have to, go and send emails. They can actually just like message to each other within the app. So I think that's, and just kind of like they almost like preparing with the app even before the conference. And I know it's not novel, but something that is like, I think also can be potentially done with AI messages and etc. Again, that's my perspective. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's great. Absolutely, Elmira. I completely agree. I think AI allows for personalization now with communications, right? Make it a little bit more personal and relevant to the audiences. Again, going back to the points that we tried to make earlier. Kayla, can you close down the last question for us before I open up the QA? I know that we don't have the 15 minutes, but please, what are your thoughts? And before we get to the QA.
I like everyone, we're experimenting. And I guess the number one guidance I would say to all marketers is you just have to experiment. You got to tinker. There's so many interesting tools that exist. There are tools that will help you write content, short form content. There are like a buddy where you can basically have it, to Cynthia's point, another strategist that you can work with. You have to be thinking about it of ways that can make you, faster, more effective, and really be able to accelerate and collaborate in a different way. So my biggest guidance would be, don't be scared of it. Just find a small project, find a couple tools, create like a group of individuals within your own company that are willing to kind of tinker. I have like a little solver squad, I call it. So we just, I put out a call to my team and I said, who wants to do this with me? And we're going to try different AI tools and we're going to apply them to our own work to see what comes out. Because what someone said to me, which I think was really brilliant, and Martin, I think you need to hear this, you're not going to, your job will exist. You're not going to, be taken over by AI, but marketers can get ahead of us if they apply AI. And that was the thing that stuck out to me, right? It was not that, it's going to take over, that's not going to happen, but marketers will be able to get ahead of the marketers that aren't trying to apply and tinker with it. And I think that was the thing that kind of shook me into like, okay, we're going to try this. We're going to tinker. We're going to use different tools in order to get to different outcomes. So I just encourage all the marketers out there to try it. try it in a safe space, have a, solver group, as I'm calling mine, that kind of tinkers with different tools, and then find what works for you, right? Because there's an application here which ultimately will serve you well. And so I guess that's more of a bigger, we got you, Martin. And I'm happy to share my, tinkering tools with you later on as well.
Thank you. We'll share some notes. And I did not write this speech introductory through ChatGPT. Anyway, thank you very much for that, Kayla. I really do appreciate it. And I know we had a couple questions come in. Maya, I think Sean was eager to ask Cynthia something. So I don't know. This is a question right here. Here we go. Are people finding in-person is returning to pre-pandemic attendance? I thought it would be harder to get people out, but then I'm 100% work from home. Anybody wants to take this? I know.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to. I'm seeing, it's funny. This is where we need AI to predict it. When we returned to events in 2021, I cut my number to a third because I knew with flight restrictions the way they were, it made it harder. It was just more friction in the system. Now I find that they're coming back in the same number. Like I was shooting for an event this next week we're doing in Las Vegas. We were anticipating that we're going to have 2,400 attendees, and we're now closing in on 2,800 attendees. And I think what we're seeing is back to what we started to say at the top of this call, experience. Like people are really looking for two things. One, experience, and then the second is networking, because a lot of the products and services that you are providing as marketers, there is such a demand. And if you are setting it up right and you have the experience and then you have the networking opportunities, I think you're going to see a return that's going to be, if not greater than what we would have seen at the start of, let's say, end of 2019, early 2020. But you're absolutely aim high because you're going to get there.
Yeah, good comment. And I've also been hearing that a lot of people have been the attendance, how people are thinking about attending is sort of becoming a little bit last minute. So
Yes.
registrations are not happening, prior to early bird deadlines anymore. I think people are making last minute decisions, and so things have changed. But with that, I'm going to start shutting us down for the moment. This has been fantastic, and I feel like we should be like doing a long form 4-hour conversation. I will be totally in if you guys are in. I'm not sure if people want to attend for that long, but I would too. But this was very fantastic, very educational, practical. Thank you for the pragmatic approach and your tips. And thank you for making yourself available for this. I know you're super busy. I know you have big events coming up in the next few days, so I appreciate that. So any last closing thoughts you wanted to throw at us before we have a closing message from Maya? No?
Torben, I just want to say very, very briefly, and I said it in the chat, if you're experimenting with AI, ChatGPT now has this plugin called Advanced Data Analytics, and it essentially means that you can process Excel spreadsheets. So you can upload your last 5 years of Google Analytics data and just tell it to tell you what is in there, and it will do an amazing job. So if you hate Excel spreadsheets, you're saved.
No, I kind of like it, Torben. I don't know. But but anyway, thank you for that tip. I know there was a couple more questions. We don't have time, but I want to close it down. Thank you once again, everyone. Thank you all the attendees for coming. I know we had people from around the globe, so awesome. Thank you very much for attending, and looking forward to next conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Martin, Cynthia, Almira, Kayla, and Torben. What an incredible discussion we've had here today, and I want to extend my deepest gratitude to each and every one of you for being a part of this event. We truly hope that you found today's session educational and useful in shaping your event marketing strategies. And just a quick reminder, keep an eye on your inbox because we will be sending out a thank you email to all participants, along with high-level summary points of today's discussion, as well as a small yet useful gift waiting for you, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. And a big shout out to our sponsors, EventMovi and Mavis. Be sure to visit their profiles and connect with them on LinkedIn. They've been instrumental in making this event possible. But before we say goodbye, your feedback is incredibly valuable to us. So please do complete our survey and let us know how we did today, because I really, really need to know. And if you'd like more information on us here at Pinch or a complimentary consultation for your event marketing needs, let us know. Once again, thank you all so much for your participation, your insights, and your energy. It's been a pleasure having you here today. And until next time, farewell.